Samantha had always found peace in the quiet corners of Redfern Forest. The tall pines and the soft carpet of fallen leaves were her sanctuary from the chaos of everyday life. On this particular afternoon, the air was cool and crisp, with golden sunlight filtering through the branches, casting dappled shadows on the ground. She adjusted the straps of her backpack and took a slow, steady breath. Her boots crunched lightly on the familiar dirt path, and for a moment everything felt perfectly normal. But then a strange noise broke the calm, a faint, pained whimper echoing softly somewhere off the beaten track. Samantha stopped in her tracks, heart quickening. The sound wasn't natural, it was desperate and full of fear. It came from deeper in the woods, from a direction where the trees grew thicker and the underbrush tangled into a wild mess. Normally she wouldn't stray from the trail, but something about that whimper pulled at her, an unspoken plea that stirred something inside her. She glanced around, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, searching for the source. The forest, suddenly, seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. The rustle of leaves, the chatter of distant birds, all fell away beneath that urgent sound. Slowly, Samantha stepped off the path, her boots sinking slightly into soft moss and loose pine needles. Branches scratched her jacket and tangled in her hair, but she didn't stop. Each step took her closer to the source of the pain. The whimper came again, louder and more urgent, and this time it was mixed with a faint sound, a soft scraping like metal against stone. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pushed through a thick stand of bushes and emerged into a small clearing bathed in late afternoon light. What she saw made her breath hitch. A dog was trapped in the middle of the clearing, its leg caught fast in a rusty metal bear trap. The device was old, corroded and jagged, and it had snapped shut over the dog's front paw with unforgiving force. The dog trembled, eyes wide and glossy with fear and pain. Its fur was matted and dusty, the thin shape of its ribs visible beneath the grime. It whimpered again, a sharp, broken sound that made Samantha's throat tighten. The dog's gaze locked onto hers, wild, pleading and desperate. But it didn't snap or growl. Instead, it seemed to beg silently for help. Samantha knelt down slowly, keeping her voice low and steady. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here to help," she whispered, reaching out a hand, but keeping a safe distance from the trap. The dog flinched but didn't move away. Her mind raced. She knew that bear traps were dangerous and brutal, designed to catch large animals by crushing their limbs. The metal was cold and unforgiving, and the dog's paw was bleeding, tiny droplets of dark red staining the dirt. She felt a pang of sorrow. Who had left such a trap here? And how long had the dog been suffering? Without hesitation, Samantha reached into her backpack and pulled out a bottle of water and a small towel she always carried for emergencies. Carefully, she wetted the cloth and dabbed gently at the dog's injured paw. The dog whimpered again but remained still, as if it trusted her despite the pain. Time felt suspended in the golden glow of the clearing. Samantha's fingers trembled. As she looked for something to pry the trap open, a stick or a rock, anything that could help, she spotted a thick branch lying nearby and grabbed it, testing its strength. Taking a deep breath, she positioned the stick beneath the edge of the trap's jaw and pushed upward with all her might. The metal groaned and resisted, sharp edges digging into her palms. The dog's breathing quickened and it flinched but didn't snap at her. Samantha pushed harder, sweat beading on her forehead, willing the rusty trap to give way. A loud, metallic click finally broke the silence. The jaws of the trap loosened just enough for the dog to pull its paw free. It yanked its leg out with a sharp cry, then collapsed onto the soft earth, panting heavily. Samantha reached out to comfort it, her voice gentle and warm. "You're safe now." The dog looked up at her with tired, grateful eyes. For a brief moment it seemed like the world had paused. Two souls connected in that quiet clearing, bound by pain and hope. But then, almost as suddenly as it had appeared, the dog shook itself, stood on wobbly legs, and barked sharply. It looked toward the dense woods beyond the clearing, then turned and disappeared into the shadows like a fleeting shadow. Samantha was left alone, heart pounding, wondering what had just happened and what would come next. The forest seemed to close in around Samantha after the dog disappeared into the shadows. The silence returned, but her heart still raced, echoing the memory of those desperate eyes, the fear, the pain, the fragile trust she had seen in that moment. She wiped her sweaty palms on her pants and glanced down at the patch of disturbed earth where the bear trap had lain open. Though the dog was gone, the weight of what she'd witnessed settled heavily on her. A wild animal caught in a human-made trap, suffering in silence, left alone to fight its pain. It felt like a cruelty she couldn't ignore. Samantha's mind swirled with questions. Who would set such a trap here deep in the forest? And why hadn't anyone else found the poor dog? Her gaze drifted back to the trap itself. Old, rusted, and merciless. She crouched, running her fingers along the jagged edges, careful not to cut herself. The metal still felt cold despite the afternoon warmth. She knew the trap was designed to clamp down hard, crushing bone and tissue to hold large animals like bears or wolves. It was brutal, made to immobilize, not to kill. Suddenly, a soft noise startled her, a faint whimper nearby. Samantha spun around, heart leaping. From behind a cluster of thick ferns, the dog emerged slowly, limping but determined. Its injured paw was swollen and bleeding, the skin torn and raw. The dog's eyes met hers again, filled with pain, but also a flicker of hope. It took a cautious step forward, then another, each movement painful but brave. Samantha reached out again, her voice low and soothing. "It's okay, I won't hurt you." The dog hesitated, then took a few more steps closer. Its trust was fragile, like a thread stretched thin over a storm. Samantha's practical mind kicked in. She couldn't leave the dog here injured and vulnerable, but the forest was miles from the nearest town and she was alone. Still, the wild animal's need was clear. It needed help, fast. She scanned her backpack quickly. There was her water bottle, a first aid kit, a small folding knife and some snacks. Nothing perfect for this situation, but enough to try. Carefully, she knelt down and tore a strip of cloth from her shirt, folding it into a makeshift bandage. The dog flinched at the touch but stayed still. As she gently wrapped the injured paw, Samantha's eyes never left the dog's face. The animal whimpered softly but didn't pull away. Its breath came in ragged pants and every muscle in its body trembled. Samantha felt a pang of sympathy so strong it almost hurt. "Hang in there," she murmured. "I'll help you." The dog's ears flicked toward a distant sound, the faint rustling of leaves and distant calls of birds. It was a reminder that the forest was still alive, wild and unpredictable. But for now, in this quiet clearing, the moment belonged to them. The injured dog and the stranger who had stepped off the path to answer its silent cry. Suddenly the dog shifted and let out a small growl, low and warning. Samantha froze, heart pounding. She wasn't sure if the dog was afraid or trying to protect her. She stayed still, not wanting to frighten it further. Slowly, the dog settled again, sitting on its haunches and gazing at Samantha with those deep, soulful eyes. There was a silent understanding between them, a fragile bond forged in pain and the instinct to survive. Samantha's mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do next. She couldn't carry the dog through the forest alone. It was too heavy, too injured. Calling for help on her phone wasn't an option either. There was no signal this far in. Still, she couldn't leave the dog to suffer here. She glanced around. The clearing, searching for any sign of civilization. All she saw was endless trees, thick undergrowth, and shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower. Time was running out. The dog suddenly stood, limping but steady. It looked back at Samantha, as if urging her to follow. Heart pounding, Samantha grabbed her pack and rose to her feet. She didn't know where the dog was leading her, or if following was even wise, but she trusted that look in its eyes, and more than anything, she couldn't leave it behind. Together, they slipped through the trees, the injured dog limping, ahead, and Samantha moving carefully after, stepping softly over roots and fallen branches. The forest closed around them, thick with shadows and secrets. What lay ahead was unknown, but Samantha's resolve was clear. She would follow this wild, wounded creature anywhere. The forest around Samantha grew darker as the sun began its slow descent behind the horizon. The air, once warm and golden, cooled noticeably, carrying a damp, earthy scent. Samantha's eyes flicked nervously between the twisting shadows and the injured dog, limping steadily just a few feet ahead. Despite the growing chill and fading light, she followed without hesitation, every step heavy with worry and determination. The dog moved carefully, each step measured but clearly painful. Its paw was wrapped in the torn cloth Samantha had fashioned, but it wasn't enough to stop the bleeding or ease the sharp sting of the rusty bear trap's cruel bite. Samantha's heart ached watching the animal struggle. After what felt like an endless walk, the dog finally stopped near a fallen log, panting hard. Samantha sank down beside it, relieved to take a moment. She fumbled in her backpack, pulling out the first aid kit she always carried for emergencies. Her fingers shook slightly. She wasn't a veterinarian, but she knew enough basic care to help stabilize the dog. She pulled out antiseptic wipes and gently cleaned around the wound on the dog's paw. The dog flinched but stayed still, gazing at her with an odd mix of wariness and gratitude. Samantha whispered soothing words, her voice soft but firm. "You're so brave. Just a little longer, okay?" Her hands moved slowly as she tore sterile gauze and wrapped the paw carefully. The dog rested its head on her knee, and for a brief moment Samantha felt a fragile connection, a silent bond born from pain and compassion. But then the dog stirred suddenly, looking toward the dense thicket nearby with sharp alertness. Samantha followed its gaze, heart skipping a beat. The trap, the cruel metal jaws, still lay nearby, half buried in leaves and dirt. She stood and walked back to it, dread settling in her stomach. Her fingers traced the trap's jagged edges again, cold and unforgiving even in the growing dusk. She took a deep breath and knelt beside it, her mind racing for a way to open the cruel device. There was no key, no obvious release, just cold steel designed to snap shut and hold tight. Frustration bubbled up inside her, but she forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. She looked around the clearing for anything useful, a sturdy stick, a rock, anything she could use as leverage. After a moment she spotted a thick, straight branch lying near the base of a tree. It was long and strong, just the right size to wedge into the trap's jaws. Samantha grabbed it and set it beneath the trap's arm, applying pressure slowly. The trap resisted fiercely, groaning as the metal scraped against wood. Her arms trembled. With effort, sweat prickling her forehead in spite of the cool air. The dog watched her, eyes wide and anxious, as if sensing the urgency. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Samantha pushed harder, grit filling her every movement. The metal creaked, twisted, and finally, with a loud, painful snap, the jaws of the trap loosened. Samantha didn't hesitate. She reached in carefully and freed the dog's paw, already swollen and bruised but no longer trapped. The dog yelped, sharply but didn't struggle, as if relief flooded through its aching limb. For a moment the dog collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily. Samantha crouched beside it, her hands trembling as she rubbed gentle circles along its back. The dog's eyes met hers, and this time there was something new, a flicker of trust, fragile but unmistakable. Then, unexpectedly, the dog moved. It stood up shakily, testing its freed paw. Samantha watched, breath held as the dog took a tentative step forward, then another. It limped, but was free. The dog turned toward her, tail wagging weakly, and nuzzled her hand with its cold nose. Samantha smiled, warmth flooding her chest despite the chill of the forest. But then, without warning, the dog barked sharply and bolted into the woods, disappearing swiftly among the trees. Samantha sat back on the log, heart pounding. The dog was gone, free but still wild and unknown. As twilight fell over Redfern Forest, Samantha wrapped the torn cloth tighter around the dog's paw in her mind, hoping the small act of kindness had made a difference. The forest held its breath, the story between them unfinished, waiting for what would come next. Samantha sat on the fallen log, her heart pounding loud in the quiet forest. The dog, free now from the cruel grip of the bear trap, had vanished into the thick underbrush almost as quickly as it had appeared. The fading light made the woods seem both mysterious and haunting, shadows twisting between the trees like silent watchers. For a moment she felt utterly alone. But even as the forest's silence wrapped around her, Samantha couldn't shake the vivid image of those wide, frightened eyes, the eyes that had silently begged for help and, somehow, found trust in a stranger. Her breath came in short bursts as she leaned forward, rubbing the ache from her arms where she'd wrestled with the trap. The quiet crackle of leaves underfoot startled her, and she looked up sharply, expecting to see the dog. But there was nothing, only the gentle sway of branches in the evening breeze. Samantha stood, brushing dirt from her pants. She felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. She had freed the dog, yes, but what would happen now? It was injured and alone in the wild. Would it survive? Would it trust anyone else enough to seek help? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden rustling from behind a cluster of bushes nearby. Samantha froze, eyes scanning the shadows. And then, slowly, the dog emerged. Its coat was dusty and ragged, but its eyes shone with an unmistakable spark. The dog limped toward her, cautious but steady. Samantha's heart lifted. Maybe it wasn't going to run away after all. The dog stopped a few feet away and looked up at Samantha, its tail wagging weakly. Then, as if making a sudden decision, it took a few steps closer and gently licked her outstretched hand. The warmth of that touch was electric, a quiet thank you spoken without words. Samantha smiled, tears threatening behind her eyes. The moment was pure and unexpected, a fragile bridge between two wounded souls. But then the dog's mood shifted abruptly. It barked sharply, a sound full of urgency, and darted toward the edge of the clearing. Samantha's eyes widened. Instead of running away, the dog was leading her somewhere. Curious and hopeful, she followed, moving carefully to keep up with the dog's uneven pace. The woods around them grew darker and thicker, branches scraping against her jacket. The dog stopped at a narrow path barely visible beneath the fallen leaves. Samantha hesitated, but the dog looked back at her, its eyes pleading. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the hidden trail. The forest seemed to close in around them, a world apart from the bright, safe trail she'd left behind. The dog moved confidently despite its injury, guiding her deeper into the shadows. Samantha's mind raced with questions. What was the dog trying to show her? Was it leading her to someone or something? After several minutes of careful walking, the dog stopped again, this time beside a large, moss-covered rock. It dropped something at Samantha's feet. She bent down and picked it up, surprise flooding her chest. It was a torn piece of cloth, dirty and frayed, but unmistakably familiar. Samantha's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. It was part of a scarf, one she had seen before in local news reports about a missing hiker named Emily. The connection was immediate and chilling. The dog's bark echoed again, sharp and insistent, as if urging Samantha to understand the gravity of what she'd found. Her heart pounded as she realized the dog wasn't just a random stray. It was trying to communicate, to help find someone in danger. Samantha's thoughts spun with possibilities. Could this dog be Emily's companion, somehow surviving and searching for help? Or was it a wild animal driven by something deeper, something impossible to explain? The forest around her felt alive with secrets. Samantha knelt down, placing a gentle hand on the dog's head. "We're going to get help," she promised softly. The dog's eyes met hers once more, filled with trust and hope. Then, as the first stars began to peek through the canopy, it settled beside her, no longer afraid, no longer alone. In that quiet, shadowed clearing, a new chapter had begun, one shaped by bravery, trust, and a mysterious bond neither Samantha nor the dog could yet fully understand. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall pines of Redfern Forest, casting a golden glow over the damp earth. Samantha had barely slept, her mind tangled with thoughts of the dog, the torn scarf, and the missing hiker. She knew she couldn't just leave the injured animal out here to fend for itself, nor could she ignore the clue it had led her to. Before dawn, she packed a small bag, extra bandages, food, water, and a blanket, and set out back toward the clearing where she'd freed the dog from the bear trap. The forest was quieter now, peaceful except for the occasional chirp of birds waking to the new day. Samantha's footsteps were soft, careful, her eyes scanning the underbrush for any sign of movement. After what felt like an eternity, she spotted something, a faint shape resting beneath a thick bush near the edge of the clearing. Her heart jumped. It was the dog. The animal was lying down, its body curled protectively, eyes half closed but alert. The makeshift bandage she had wrapped yesterday was still in place, though dirtied and loose. The dog's breathing was steady but shallow, and the limp in its gait was unmistakable. Samantha knelt beside it gently, careful not to startle the fragile creature. "Hey there, I brought you some food," she whispered, offering a small piece of dried meat. The dog sniffed the offering hesitantly before taking it, chewing slowly. Samantha smiled softly, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and worry. But there was something more. A glimmer of recognition in the dog's eyes, as if it knew it was no longer alone. After letting the dog eat, Samantha reached into her pack again and pulled out the torn scarf. Holding it carefully, she looked for any signs that might explain its presence here. The fabric was familiar, a patterned weave, torn and stained, but unmistakably the scarf of Emily, the missing hiker whose disappearance had cast a shadow over the nearby town. Samantha's mind raced with questions. How had the dog come into possession of the scarf? Was Emily still somewhere in the forest? And most urgently, could the dog lead her to her? The dog stirred and stood slowly, wobbling on its injured paw but determined. It looked up at Samantha, then, in a sudden burst of energy, dropped the scarf at her feet. Its eyes seemed to say, "Look what I have, help me find her." Samantha's heart pounded. The bond between the two was undeniable, and the dog's behavior felt purposeful, as though it was trying to communicate something vital. Determined to act quickly, Samantha wrapped the dog's paw again with fresh bandages and slung the blanket over her shoulders. She pulled out her phone and headed toward the ranger station at the edge of the forest. As she walked, the dog limped faithfully beside her, sometimes pausing to sniff the air or glance back at her with those deep, soulful eyes. At the ranger station, Samantha explained everything: the trapped dog, the torn scarf, the dog's strange behavior. The rangers listened intently, exchanging looks of surprise and cautious hope. They agreed to organize a search party to comb the forest, following the trail the dog had hinted at. That afternoon, Samantha joined the search team, guiding them as best she could through the twisting trails and dense woods. The dog moved ahead, leading the way with surprising confidence despite its injury. Every so often it would pause, sniffing the ground or barking softly, almost urging the team onward. Hours passed, tension thick in the air, as shadows lengthened and hope flickered. Then, just as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, one of the rangers called out. They had found signs of a campsite, a battered tent, a few scattered belongings, deep in a thicket where the dog had stopped. Samantha's breath caught. The campsite was abandoned, but the discovery meant Emily had been here. The dog's trail had led them closer than anyone had dared hope. That night, as the search party set up camp nearby, Samantha sat quietly by the fire. The dog curled at her feet. The bond between them had deepened, forged in shared courage and trust. The dog, once a frightened, injured creature, was now a symbol of hope, a living link to a missing person, and a reminder of the power of compassion in the wild. Samantha knew the search wasn't over. But with the dog by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The fire crackled softly in the darkness, casting flickering shadows on Samantha's face as she sat beside the sleeping dog. The forest night was alive with distant owl calls, and the rustling of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Despite the peaceful sounds, Samantha's mind was restless, turning over every detail from the day's search. The abandoned campsite lingered in her thoughts, the battered tent, scattered belongings, and the unmistakable signs that Emily had been here not long ago. What had happened to her? Why had she left the safety of that small shelter? And could she still be somewhere nearby, lost and in need of help? The dog stirred, lifting its head and looking up at Samantha, with eyes full of quiet determination. It was as if the animal understood the urgency, the unspoken mission they shared. Samantha gently stroked its head, feeling a surge of gratitude for this unlikely companion who had not only survived the trap, but now seemed to be leading her through this mystery. At first light, the search party prepared to move deeper into the forest, following the subtle signs left behind, broken branches, faint footprints, and patches of disturbed earth. Samantha stayed close to the dog, who now walked with more confidence, its injured paw carefully supported by the bandage. The forest thickened as they pushed forward. Moss-covered trunks towered overhead, sunlight filtering through the dense canopy in scattered beams. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, but also carried a subtle tension, something hidden just beyond sight. As they moved, Samantha noticed the dog occasionally pausing, sniffing intensely at the ground or turning, its head toward the underbrush. Each time, the animal's behavior suggested it was picking up a trail only it could sense. At one point, the dog suddenly stopped and emitted a low, urgent bark. The search team froze. Samantha crouched, peering into a small thicket dense with brambles and vines. "Look here," she said, pointing to a faint path barely visible under the overgrowth. It was narrow, hardly used but distinct enough to suggest recent passage. The rangers nodded and the group pressed on cautiously. Samantha's heart pounded as she followed the dog through the tangled foliage. Every step seemed to bring them closer to something or someone waiting in the shadows. After a tense hour, the path opened into a small clearing. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Scattered among the leaves were personal items, an empty water bottle, a cracked phone, and a worn backpack with a familiar logo. She recognized the backpack immediately. It was Emily's. The discovery was a powerful confirmation that they were on the right track. Samantha knelt, examining the items carefully. The phone was dead, its screen cracked, but the backpack contained some emergency supplies, a flashlight, a map, and a small journal. Samantha opened the journal and skimmed through the pages. The handwriting was hurried but clear, filled with notes about her journey, descriptions of the forest, and cryptic mentions of someone or something watching from the shadows. The final entries were particularly chilling. Emily wrote about strange noises at night, the feeling of being followed, and a desperate hope for rescue. A shiver ran down Samantha's spine. The forest held secrets deeper and darker than she had imagined. Suddenly, the dog barked again, alerting everyone. It was standing near a cluster of bushes, its body tense, eyes fixed on something hidden. Samantha stepped forward slowly, heart racing. The search party held their breath as she parted the branches. There, lying on a bed of moss and leaves, was Emily, weak, pale, but alive. Relief flooded Samantha as she knelt beside the hiker, gently shaking her shoulder. Emily's eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed her lips. "You found me," she whispered hoarsely. The dog nuzzled Emily's hand, tail wagging weakly. The rescue had been long and perilous, but hope had finally returned to Redfern Forest. As the rangers called for medical help and prepared to carry Emily back to safety, Samantha stayed close to the dog, grateful for the unexpected bond that had led to this miraculous reunion. The forest still held its mysteries, but in this moment kindness and courage had triumphed. The forest seemed to breathe a collective sigh as the first rays of dawn filtered through the tall trees. After the long, tense night, hope had finally taken root. Emily was alive, fragile but determined, and Samantha felt a profound sense of relief wash over her like a warm tide. The rangers carefully lifted Emily onto a stretcher, moving slowly to avoid jostling her weakened body. Samantha stayed close, the dog walking steadily beside her, its once pained limp now eased by the gentle care it had received. The animal's eyes met Samantha's every few steps, communicating a silent gratitude that words could never capture. As they made their way back toward the ranger station, Samantha reflected on everything that had happened. She had come to the forest that morning expecting a simple walk. Instead, she found herself tangled in a story of survival, trust, and unexpected friendship. At the station, medical personnel quickly took over Emily's care. Samantha sat quietly nearby, watching as doctors and nurses tended to the hiker's wounds. Emily's face was pale, her breathing shallow, but the spark of life in her eyes was unmistakable. The dog, now comfortably resting on a soft blanket, seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. It relaxed, occasionally looking toward Emily with a protective gaze. In the days that followed, Samantha visited the ranger station often. She helped with minor tasks and spent time with the dog, whose presence had become a comforting constant. Slowly, the story of their shared journey spread through the community, inspiring awe and gratitude. Emily began to recover, her strength returning with each passing day. One afternoon, she asked to see the dog, the silent hero who had guided the search party through the forest. When the dog and Emily were reunited, the moment was quiet but deeply moving. Emily reached out gently, her fingers trembling as they brushed the dog's fur. The animal responded with a soft nuzzle, tail wagging weakly. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." Samantha watched the exchange with a warm smile. It was a moment of healing, not just for Emily but for the dog and for herself. Over time, Samantha learned more about the dog's history. The animal had once belonged to a local family, but had wandered off months before Emily's disappearance. Somehow it had survived on its own, developing a unique bond with the lost hiker. The dog's loyalty and courage had saved a life, proving that even in the wildest places, compassion could create unbreakable connections. Samantha found herself changed too. The experience had deepened her understanding of kindness and bravery, inspiring her to volunteer more actively in local rescue efforts. One evening, as Samantha walked through the now familiar forest trails with the dog by her side, she paused to look up at the stars beginning to twinkle above the canopy. The journey had been unexpected, filled with danger and uncertainty, but also with moments of profound beauty and hope. In the quiet of the forest night, Samantha felt a deep sense of peace. She knew their story wasn't just about rescue. It was about the bonds we forge when we least expect them, and the power of trust to heal even the deepest wounds. As the dog padded gently beside her, Samantha whispered softly, "Thank you for trusting me." The dog's tail wagged in response, and together they disappeared into the shadowed woods, forever connected by a story that would never be forgotten. The days that followed Emily's rescue were filled with quiet celebrations and heartfelt reunions. News of the miraculous discovery spread through the small town like wildfire, sparking hope and gratitude in the hearts of many. Samantha found herself at the center of it all, not as a hero, she would insist, but simply as someone who had listened to the silent call for help. Emily's recovery was slow but steady. With each day she grew stronger, her smiles brighter and her laughter more frequent. The dog, now named Bear by the local community for the trap that had once nearly claimed its life, became a beloved figure, a living symbol of survival and loyalty. Samantha visited Emily often, and their bond deepened beyond the rescue. Emily shared stories of her time lost in the forest, the fears she had faced, the strange sensations of being watched, and how the dog's presence had given her comfort in the darkest moments. One afternoon, as Samantha and Emily sat on the porch of the small cabin where Emily was staying, Bear rested at their feet, his once wounded paw now fully healed and strong. The sunlight danced through the trees, casting patterns of light and shadow around them. Emily looked at Samantha, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you, and Bear. You both saved my life." Samantha shook her head gently. "It was Bear who found you. I just followed." Emily smiled. "It's funny how sometimes the smallest things, or the quietest creatures, can make the biggest difference." The dog lifted its head, as if understanding every word. Samantha's thoughts drifted to the future. The experience had changed, her opening her heart to new possibilities and deepening her respect for the wild and its secrets. She felt a calling to dedicate more of her time to helping lost or injured animals, to protecting the fragile balance between humans and nature. Months later, Samantha started volunteering with a local wildlife rescue group. She became an advocate for animal welfare, educating others about the importance of compassion and responsibility. The story of Bear and Emily became a powerful example, one she shared often, inspiring many to act with kindness. Meanwhile, Bear adapted to his new life with a loving foster family, where he was given space and patience to heal fully. Yet, whenever Samantha visited, he would greet her with the same fierce loyalty, reminding her of the bond forged in those desperate hours deep in the forest. One cool autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades, Of pink and orange, Samantha stood at the edge of Redfern Forest, looking out over the trees that had witnessed so much. She felt a quiet joy in her chest, a feeling of hope and renewal. The forest was no longer just a place of mystery and danger. It was a place of healing and connection. The story of a trapped dog and a lost hiker had become a testament to the power of empathy, courage, and trust. As the breeze rustled the leaves, Samantha whispered softly, "Thank you, Bear, for everything." The dog's silhouette appeared beside her, strong and steady. Together they watched the stars emerge one by one in the velvet sky, ready to face whatever new adventures awaited them. Their journey had come full circle, from fear and uncertainty to healing and hope. And in that they had found something truly extraordinary, a new beginning.